Hi guys, Luca here from Sabre Airsoft with another replica to have a little bit of a look at, and today we're looking at one of the most controversial and infamous platforms in the world, really, I would argue. Controversial with very specific groups of people, and we'll get onto that. But this is the L85A2 from WE. This is the now going out of service rifle for the British Army. And that's probably why it's one of the more controversial ones, because a lot of people will probably see this and look at it in revulsion. And almost all of them, or at least a large portion of those people, will be former or current service members. They very much do not like this. And that's a very well-known thing as well. And in fact, whenever I talk to someone who's in the army or has been in the army, they just go, why would you ever want this? However, in Airsoft, it's actually surprisingly popular, although you don't see many of them. It is quite well loved for those that do own them. I think I've only ever actually seen one in the wild, and that was at OP Nemesis, and they were extremely happy with theirs. That's fair enough. So before I get into talking about the specifics of the replica itself, let's just do a little bit of history about the L85, although you'll probably know it more commonly as the SA80A2. So first off, what's the difference between SA80 and L85? Well, L85 is the official designation of the platform in the British Army, whereas SA80 was the name of the project, which was the small arms of the 1980s, which was when the A1 was originally developed. If you ever want to know how to tell the difference between an A1 and A2, it's actually relatively straightforward. The first and most obvious indicator is usually the trigger. The trigger will have this blade on the back here, and the reason for that is that soldiers were realizing that they're basically mud and snow and things like that could get caught up behind the trigger and prevent them from pulling the trigger and firing the platform. So the A2 revision, which was done by Heckler and Koch, included the addition of a blade on the back of the trigger in order to break up anything that was behind it and prevent that jam. Another thing that was a problem with the A1 was the mag release was too easy to hit, and so this raised shield here was added in order to prevent people accidentally dropping their magazine during operation. Believe it or not, it does actually have full auto capability, which if you were to go by British Army doctrine, you would think it doesn't. They very much don't like that. That particular control is here. If you've ever watched Garan Thumb's video on the L85, it was quite funny to watch him try and figure out how you would hold the bolt open, how you would lock the bolt back, and where the bolt release was, because it's actually, this is the bolt release. This tiny weird square here is the bolt release, and on the real one, this lever is in fact the bolt hold open. So what you would do if you wanted to lock the bolt back before loading in a magazine is you would pull the charging handle back, activate the lever, although in the case of the real one it would be down and not up. So you pull the charging handle back, actuate the lever, and that would then lock the bolt back. And then when you wanted to drop the bolt, go to the other side and pull down that square to release it. Very simple operation. Although, where credit is due, if you don't know about that, why would you know to do that? It's not obvious that that's the bolt release. It's very nondescript. Some of the other changes that Heckler and Koch brought in when they did their magic to the A1 was they also introduced, I believe actually, the dust cover. I don't know if that was on the original. It probably was, though I can't quite remember. I've never served, by the way. I'm just a bit of an enthusiast. The other thing was the charging handle. On the A1, the charging handle is in fact round. I might have an example of that. Here we go. So this is an example from another replica that I've kind of got, and it's a project that I'm never going to finish. But this is what the A1 charging handle looked like. As you can see, it was just round. And what was happening is a lot of soldiers were getting shells ejected into their face, which they were, I'm sure you can imagine, not too pleased about. And so they added what is the same function on an AR-15 pattern rifle, which is the charging handle also acts as a deflector. On the AR-15 pattern rifles, you might see it as a little block that's extruded out the back here. Another thing I believe is they also updated the gas system as well, with a delayed gas system as you would find in a HK416, as opposed to a direct gas system. So rather than the gas going directly to the bolt to then push the bolt back, instead it would only push on a rod, which would then push. So that is another change. I believe that came in with the A2, but do feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, guys. I've not served, and my knowledge is third and fourth hand at best. There is something about this one, though. This replica is something that I've done. So on the normal WE L85, when you pull the charging handle back, it just do that. And if you wanted to lock it in place, it's a bit of a pain to do, because you would either have to hold the bolt drop in order to do so, which is on the other side of the replica, or you would have to reach up through the mag well and actuate it. However, with this one, thanks to another YouTuber called English Kiwi, the bolt hold open now works, and you can do that one-handed. All you have to do is pull back, push down, and it holds the bolt open. So you can actually do the full manual of arms. Why are you able to do that? Well, let's take it apart real quick and I'll show you. To field strip the L85A2, very simple. It's just 2 body pins, one at the back there, which is the longer one, which is important, and then that one there. After that, you can pull the lower receiver away from the upper. And we can have a look now at what English Kiwi came up with. Basically, this would normally just be a brass rod, and that's it. What he did is he designed this arm here. Originally it was 3D printed, but these days it's made of metal. And I believe he's still selling them, might still have some left, although I think he stopped for a while, or hasn't really thought about selling them. And what this does is just add this arm here, which then pushes on the bolt hold open, on the bolt release, to then pull up the bolt catch. Simple as that. Really simple design, but I love it. You'll also notice something, if I start pulling the trigger here, take it off safety, is that the arm bends. But that is because it is quite a thin metal arm. That's actually not an issue on this particular replica, really, because that is basically a piece of metal under tension, which is why in a bullpup design, I'm of the belief that something under tension such as this is better than something under compression, because under compression, this bar will bend and flex. It did it a second ago. There you go. Which can then cause binding and all sorts of issues, whereas in a system where you're doing it under tension, that doesn't happen. So with bullpups, what makes a bullpup is that the trigger will be, say, here, but all of the action, so all of the trigger group, all of the firing and everything, that happens behind the trigger, not in front. In an AR-15, for example, it happens in front or above, and in most rifles it happens in front or above, whereas in a bullpup it always happens to the rear. Now again, bullpups aren't necessarily very popular because they're ugly, because they're definitely not very popular overall, surprisingly. The reason they're generally not popular is because of the weight, but that's also what gives it an advantage in the real world. So, because all of the action is back here, that means that the balance of the rifle is usually towards the rear, which can throw people who are not necessarily used to it. But that does also mean that it's much easier to control, and it allows you as well to have a full-size barrel in the same size as a small carbine. That, certainly in CQB situations, can be an absolutely massive advantage. On to a bit more about the WE system. This is your classic WE in that it's the open bolt system. It's got the same trigger group in here as what you are probably familiar with in other replicas, such as their ARs, and I believe their G36 is very similar as well, although I could be wrong about that. I don't know that they did a G36. Yes, they did. So their G36 is also quite similar in its design. If you want to know about the individual parts within the trigger group that you can see here, Obviously this here is the trigger bar here, which is connected to what would traditionally be the trigger sear. Then back here you have the auto sear just here. This operates again exactly the same as every other AR pattern out there within the WE series, except with one minor change, which is rather than the bolt catching this end of the auto sear right here, this bar here acts in the same function. Let me put it into semi. So this is in semi, and it performs the same function. Whereas if I'm holding down the trigger and in full auto, put it in full auto real quick, it should. Oh. Is that in full auto? No, that's in semi. Now it's in full auto. So when it's in full auto, the hammer will always drop as long as the bolt catches the auto sear. When it's in semi-automatic, the bolt will catch the auto sear, but nothing will happen. All that will do is basically go, you're in battery. As you can see. Ugh. Recommendations for this, if you are going to buy one of these, is probably eventually you will probably need to replace the sears inside with steel ones. Although from my understanding, WE are starting to now release newer ones with updated internals, including steel sears. It uses the standard WE AR-15 Stanag mag, and the bolt carrier can be easily removed. This is your recoil system. It is quite a strong recoil system, and it does not have full travel, although I'm fairly certain you could, if you really wanted to, modify it to have full travel. And then to remove the bolt, very simply pull it all the way back, remove the charging handle, and slide the bolt out the rest of the way. Bolt, very similar to most of the other ones. Their nozzle, I do believe, is in fact the same as their other replicas. It is a little bit stiff on this one. That's not the end of the world. In fact, I'm thinking maybe it's just a little bit stiff and needs a little bit of a grease. That's not a problem. I'll do that before giving it back. This, by the way, isn't mine. This has been very kindly lent to me by Alice, and she's been extremely patient with me in how long it's taken me to get around to doing this video. So sorry, Alice, I really didn't intend to have it this long, but here is the video. Now, unfortunately, I would take it apart further to show you the hop-up, although again, it's a very standard hop-up. Adjustment of it is done via a small hole at the top here with a grub screw. And I would take it apart further, however, despite my best efforts, I've not been able to get the gas system out. Again, putting it back together, very easy. Make sure that the two holes are pointed towards the top of the upper receiver. Line up the holes, in it goes, and then push it in and until it's no longer protruding from the back. Take your lower. Sorry, wrong, forgot a step. I forgot to put the charging handle back on. Let's get that back in there. Okay. Make sure you put your charging handle on, guys. Put your lower into your upper. Make sure to line everything up. That's not quite lined up. Usually takes me a couple of attempts. There we go. And then return your body pins. Again, longer one from this side at the very top rear. Is that actually in properly? Yep, there we go. And then the shorter one just in front of the magwell. And that's how you field trip them. As far as I can remember, in order to get the hop unit out, you need to remove the barrel. In order to remove the barrel, you need to remove this gas system, which, just like on the real one, depending on your luck, can be extremely difficult to do so. This one in particular doesn't want to play ball, so I'm not going to risk breaking it for the sake of the video. Recoil wise, it's got okay recoil, I would say. Keep the bolt hold up and down. In fact, it's quite nice recoil, and it's quite loud. It's very loud and proud. Rate of fire in full auto. Again, pretty good. About what you'd expect from a gas blowback. Ooh, propane smells so good. It really doesn't. In this particular one, the body pins do like to fall out at the slightest provocation, but as far as I'm aware, that's uncommon. So that's it really, guys. This is the L85A2. Bullpup, and I personally do love bullpups. Service rifle that won quite a number of conflicts. Too many, in my opinion. Ergo, we shouldn't have been in them. And it served the British Army quite well for a good long time. If you'd like to see some gameplay using something like this, then I can potentially arrange for that to happen. Or, if you'd like, I can even do some gameplay with a Bullpup VMP2. Yes, that exists. And in fact, if you want to buy the kit yourself, you can even go onto the website right now and buy it. Or you can just get the files, because as always with stuff that Alice has designed, she has put the files out there. There is a V2 in the works at the moment, which has a similar trigger linkage system as what this does, although that's not been officially released yet. So go check it out, guys. What better time if you don't want to get yourself a WE L85 and you already have a VMP2 and you want to carry on using all the same mags and everything, we do have a bullpup kit that you can go and get right now. That's it for this one, guys. Catch you on the next one.